Good evening, everybody. Tonight, our music is Mr. Kurt Scobie, a former student of mine. Um, Big into religious music, and this is one of his more popular versions that were out a few years back. A great musician, great guy. If you get a chance, I would definitely recommend checking some of his music on YouTube. So tonight, um, I want to remind you that I am Norm Potter. I am part of Structured Creativity Consulting. We are doing work out in schools now, or I say it's me, it's only me. I'm doing work out in schools now. And if you are interested in booking some consulting when it comes to curriculum, integration of technology, or those other things, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me, norm@normpotter.com. And also you can reach me through this channel by just some of the comments. So subscribe, and hopefully you can get a lot out of these talks that we're having now. I have been working with some schools lately, and it's great to be back in the classroom working with teachers to figure out different ways to engage students in meaningful curriculum. So before we get started, I want to send a heartfelt prayers and thoughts to Oxford schools there in Michigan. I lived in Michigan for many years, and to hear another school shooting and have people have to go through that another time here in the States is never a good thing. And it brings back, memories of all the other school shootings that we thought would be the last one. And I lived just down the road from Chardon schools and know some kids that were, there when that happened. And I was a colleague of Coach Frank Hall when after the fact. And so got to know that great man. And this needs to stop. And I know that there's a lot of things going on that, has to change. But the last thing that we should have to worry about is this kind of event happening in any of our schools. So my thoughts and prayers go out to Oxford, Michigan. So let's get into horrible transition, but let's get into, the other parts of education that we do have some control over. Standards-based grading is something that I personally believe in. I've started to use it more and more at the end of my career, even though I had to still convert it into letter grades, which was because of our system. The system didn't allow for certain things to happen in standards-based grading, so I had to adapt what I was doing into that kind of system. And it's not easily done, but it can be done. And one of the things that I have to make sure we're clear on is that we don't want to continue grades just because they've always been there and people understand that. I know that there's some value in people understanding what letter grades mean. And we sometimes fall back on the fact that, we need a GPA to get into college or those other things. But we have to start looking at what's best for kids. Grades are not a motivating factor for most kids in schools. You have those certain kids that are motivated by getting that A and being a valedictorian. We also know that, and this was my case, as long as I kept a certain GPA or a certain grade, my parents wouldn't get upset with me. So I made sure I stayed out of that D range and was able to get C's and B's and A's through high school. And that was okay because the external motivation was my parents didn't care then, as long as I got those grades. And we want to have this more of a learning environment rather than a threatening environment. And if you look at the research, and oftentimes researchers or educators know the research, but we don't always follow it. And this research says that grades are not a motivating factor. So let's look at some other options. And when we start thinking about standards-based grading, we have to, first of all, think about what we are supposed to be teaching. I've worked with some schools in the past that didn't use the right standards according to what their own curriculum said. The core curriculum is out there for everybody to see. But in the state of Ohio, we have the Ohio State standards, which are sort of modeled off of that, but not, they don't mirror them. And so we have to know exactly what standards we're teaching. So with that being said, once the standards are set and ready to go in a classroom, what we have to do is consider some of the research that's out there from Hattie and what works. So one of the things that works really, really well is being able to provide feedback to kids. And I forget the effect size, but I know it's over that 0.4 threshold that he always wants to be at to be effective. I want to say it's more in the 6 or the 0.6 or 0.7 range. So providing feedback when you have standards-based grading, teachers are able to provide very specific and critical feedback to students to move them forward within a standard, to push them to different levels of understanding. So don't forget about the web's depth of knowledge when we start talking about these standards-based grading. If you have a standard and the kid is able to reach level 1, that means they know what that standard is, or they know the parts of that standard by definition, or that it's there. And by level 2, it's more of the application of how you can use that, the skills and concepts of that standard. Then level 3 is the strategic thinking of that standard, how you can use it in a bigger picture. Then that level 4 is that creative piece, the extended thinking that goes on within that standard. So you're able to get depth within a standard if you really know how to work the combination of Hattie's with feedback and also with the web's depth of knowledge. So if we are doing that kind of picture where we have a standard and we're trying to get kids in that grade level to go through 1 through 4 in depth of knowledge, then we have to create those lessons and the feedback to provide them the opportunity to move through those levels. This does not mean that a kid that reaches level 3 should be taken to the next standard at the next grade level that sort of fits with that. We have to go deeper and allow them to start thinking differently. And once we get into that realm of getting them to think at a deeper level, more critical level, then we are starting to get into that level of learning that we all want our kids to have. So if we have this kind of idea of what we want to do with the depth of knowledge, one of the things that we tried and we piloted with some of our English teachers in the past was using what we call the proof of standards sheet. In that subject area, we were able to list all the state standards that the teacher had to teach in that year. And then every student was given in their Google Classroom a copy of that template. And their job was the teacher would tell them which standards this lesson would hit, and they would make sure they understood the standards. And then with some coaching, the students were able to understand what depth of knowledge was. So their job was anytime there was an assignment, the kids had to place that assignment at the proper level where they thought they currently fit into their level of understanding. So a student would put a link to their paper into that document, the proof of standards document, and the teacher could then look at that document and highlight that. The student would highlight the piece that they thought was the level 2 of that document for that standard. And the teacher gave very specific feedback for that one aspect of the paper. And what was nice was the kids are now reporting their grades on their own. And again, if you look at Hattie, that is a very high level of effective size when you go to self-reporting grades. That piece allowed students to really start thinking about some changes they could make to increase their understanding and show evidence of their learning. And with that, then their products became much more sophisticated. And the teacher loved the idea of being able to provide that specific feedback for the student for that specific standard at whatever level they're at. It really does make it easier to start fine-tuning that discussion that you have with students. And we also talked about, now that you have this whole grade level sheet of what they're able to understand and at what level with proof of that, the next year, that document that could then follow that student to the next teacher, and they could then pick up where they left off to make sure that they're growing that student from where they were, and that proof that's there to show where they were, rather than just giving a pre-test and asking the questions that, well, what did you learn last year? So those are the types of things that this proof of standard sheet will allow you to do. And it's a simple Google Doc, and I'd be happy to share that with anybody here in the state of Ohio. I haven't done for Ohio. I think I have it done for a little bit of Michigan for some of the grades, and I think I have a little bit of Pennsylvania done because of people that were interested in that format before and some of the other professional development that I've done. If we take it a step further, and this is way out there, so this may not impact you right away, but one of the things I'd like to see is to have our depth of knowledge not so much be on subject matter, but on skill based. So rather than giving students grades in English, I think we should give grades in communication or give our feedback in communication. This way, we know that the skills are there for the students once they enter the world outside of school. So if they can communicate effectively in person, on the telephone, via email, in social media, in front of a crowd, if we can do those different communication skills and also use web depth of knowledge to really push those different levels, it will give a better picture of who that student is moving from one grade to the next and what we can expect from that student. If we just say they got an A in English, what does that really mean? Does that mean they write well? Does that mean they read well for content? Does that mean they take tests well? Does that mean they turn in their paper on time? What does that A mean? But if I say they were at level 3 with their communication skills in social media, then you know almost exactly what they're able to communicate, at what level they're communicating at that grade level. So that's the other thing we have to keep in mind. These grade levels are important because what a third grader knows at grade level at level 3 is less than in depth than what a fourth grader would know on fourth grade standards at that same level of level 3. So there is a progression that would go through for all these standards. And that's just the realization. And we know that as teachers, that what we teach in first grade is not as complex as what we teach in third grade, and so on and so forth. So there are many steps to this, but it's something to investigate. I would highly recommend looking at Rick Wormley's work on how he talks about standards-based grading and how the impact of that is so important, especially when you start looking at how we average grades. Averaging a grade is something that should be out the window at this point. I know it's not, because it's, again, what people understand. But if a kid knows something on the first day, they get an A. But if they don't know something until 4 tries later or 10 tries later, they don't get the A. They usually find a different way to report that. Even though they know the same content, the only thing that was different was time it took for them to truly understand that concept. Now, you may disagree with me on this, but I don't think that a student should be punished because it takes them a little bit longer to learn the same thing that does somebody else. That goes into differentiation of instruction and flexibility of the teacher and various other factors. So averaging grades really is something that, again, has changed in my mind over time. So that might be another topic, but standards-based grading is something that I think we should all consider as educators at all levels. We do it at elementary. We have those marks, satisfactory, so on and so forth, a different way of looking at it, but it's basically, standards-based. Here's a standard. Do you meet it? Yes or no? And we need to start moving that way in all of our other topics. And if you're, like I said, I brought it up and I'm going to just touch on this. If you're worried about what colleges may think, I know there's a private school here in our area by the name of Hawken. They are doing a different type of transcripts that are being sent to college, and it's all about their skills and their abilities, not so much grades. They still have grades, but their focus is changing in this transcript. It's interesting if you want to look at it. It's on their webpage, Hawken upper school and lower school, I believe. And I don't know the exact address, but that's something you could look into. So that's all I have for tonight. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, you can put them in the chat, and I do get those, or you can email me at norm@normpotter.com. And I am at structuredcreativity.com also, where all my channels, all my videos from this channel are there listed, plus all my services that I offer. So as we sign off, again, my thoughts go out to Oxford schools there in Michigan. And as always, be kind, be professional, find solutions, and I'll have Kurt take us out. Have a good night, everybody.